2. Nick walks past a crater left by the creature's foot. It wreaked havoc, continuing on through the intersection. Luckily for him, the beast has once again vanished after destroying the ground units and helicopters, likely having returned to its underground lair, and torrential rain is beginning to slow the growth of the fires. He still moves with urgency, though, as he knows the area is now contaminated with radiation spread by the monster's destructive breath attack. He still had so many questions, like how the monster could produce such phenomena without burning a hole through its throat in the process, how it could heal from physical damage just so quickly, or how its metabolism worked. Surely, a creature of such titanic size couldn't sustain itself on a tiny scraps of meat alone. Taking its size into account meant that even if it ate 10 blue whales a day, that still wouldn't be enough calorie intake to support it. Along the way, he takes a note of the scattered chunks of meat and fish littering the streets. The monster wolfed down most of the meats before rampaging, but somehow the scene looks off to Nick. He studied the feeding habits of variety of animal species and knew that what typical feeding behavior looked like. This looked different, almost if it wasn't just gathering food for itself, but for a. The realization hits him like a brick, and his first instinct is to look around for any traces of blood. Finding some, he collects it, and then rushes it to the nearest convenience store. Unfortunately, it's a decent distance away from his tent, and he has to push through crowds of civilians still being evacuated. He doesn't take notice that someone is following him. He makes it to a store and asks the cashier for a available pregnancy test, and they oblige. He picks up 5 and turns to leave, then comes face to face with Audrey. Shocked but thrilled to see each other, the two strike up a conversation. Audrey tells Nick she's a reporter now, while Nick explains his current line of work before Audrey interjects, finding it odd that the man who once protested against nuclear weapons now studies their effects, to which he informs her that his position allows him to make and influence actual change in the fields of nuclear science. Audrey then addresses to the elephant in the room, New York's current monster crisis, and how Nick's new job is related to it. He explained his role in the military operations to both study and destroy the creature. While pulling out the blood sample and pregnancy test, he was about to test his theory. If he was not right, not only would it explain why the creature traveled to a place like New York City and all the way from the Southern Pacific, or why it had been collecting food, but it could also mean the entire human race is in imminent danger. So, what have you learned so far about our uninvited guest? Asked Audrey. Well, he's big. He eats meat and lots of it. He's both subaquatic and subterranean. He's radioactive in nature, and he is. Nick trailed off while preparing the pregnancy test. This was the moment of truth. Not pregnant. Nick finished seeing the test come up negative. Why did you think he was? Asked a slightly amused Audrey. Well, it was a theory I had. You see, we still haven't figured out why this thing came to New York City in the first place. It was first sighted in the Southern Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from here, which makes it even weirder. Yeah, but why does that have to do with him or her or whatever being a baby mama? Migration. Many species of a reptile and bird travel long distance for the sake of reproduction, so I figured that the fact he showed up here as well as him seemingly collected food meant he was preparing, or had already built a nest somewhere in the city and had laid eggs. Nick then sighed, but maybe I'm wrong. I still have to take those samples to a lab to fully confirm the test is accurate. But I still don't get it. How did you think it could lay eggs without meeting another giant lizard thing and getting intimate? Well, some species are able to reproduce without needing an asexual partner. It's called asexual reproduction. Where's the fun in that? Joked Audrey. Oh, hardy har hars, said Nick sarcastically. But the reason I thought he could be asexual is because of his mutation. Mutation? Oh yeah, I'm sure that thing's a mutant. It was first sighted near the Marshall Islands, where the US did loads of nuclear tests back in the 50s, and we've found traces of radiation all over the object it touched. And now, to really drive the point home, the thing started shooting green plasma out of its mouth. No other animal on Earth is capable of such thing. Shooting plasma? Oh great. What's next? Is it gonna grow rings and two more heads? And maybe even start spitting out lightning bolts? Maybe. But before she could continue, Nick interrupted her, now with a more serious and grim look. He went on, Audrey, what I'm trying to tell you is that this creature, whatever it is the very beginning, is the very first of a whole new species, with abilities our modern science hasn't even begun to understand. And it's not end with just this one. What if there's more than of them out there? If there are, then it could mean mankind is about to lose its status as the dominant species. We are not gonna be the apex predators anymore. We'll be the prey. It would be a whole new era of Earth's history, an era where monsters rule the world instead of man. Audrey sat in silence, shocked but also impressed by Nick's speech. My point is, Nick continued, finding out what creature this is and where it came from, what it could do, why is it here in New York City, and most importantly, finding out a way to destroy it could mean saving all of humanity from extinction. They both paused for a moment, taking in the reality of the whole situation. Then Nick spoke up again. All I can guess right now is that the creature has a legitimate reason for being here. If it didn't, it would have moved on by now. The only problem is, I still don't have the slightest idea of what that reason is. Maybe it's not here to lay an egg. Maybe it's gathering food for some other reason. What if it's stockpiling? Don't animals like squirrels store up a lot of food to get through hard times? Maybe, but that still doesn't tell us why it chose the Big Apple to be its new territory. Nick sighed once again. I gotta get these samples to the lab. I'll be back, Audrey. Nick exited the tent, leaving Audrey alone to think about everything she had just learned. She still couldn't believe any of this was happening, and somehow the most outlandish part of it all to her wasn't the giant radioactive monster terrorizing her hometown, but instead the fact that it had brought Nick Tatapoulos back into her life. As she continued pondering it all, something caught her eye. A tape titled Creature's Origin, with a bold red marker underneath reading Top Secret. She stared at it for a long time, imagining its content. Eventually, curiosity got the better of her common sense. She looked around to make sure nobody could see her, then took the tape and popped it into a small video player in the tent. She was greeted with the footage of the shipwreck from the days earlier. Then it cuts to the interview of the old Japanese fisherman who survived the creature's first attack. What did you see? Gojira, Gojira, Gojira. The haunting voice of the old man repeated that name over and over, burning it into Audrey's mind. Gojira. Was this the name of the creature attacking New York? She had to do something with this information. She just knew it deep down, and she knew she couldn't stop herself either. This was too good of a script. Everything she had learned was info the public needed to know as well. As an assistant, no. As a reporter, she understood. She couldn't let her fellow New Yorkers down. They needed to know the truth. Without waiting for Nick, she took the tape and left. Once her report was ready, the world would know the name of Godzilla, the name of a terrible sea beast from an ancient Japanese folklore. Is apparently the name adopted by scientists and military to describe the creature that's been menacing New York City for the past 36 hours. Reported reported Charles Kyman. Audrey couldn't believe her eyes or ears as she watches him blatantly rip off her report. What? You gotta be kidding me. He stole my whole report, she shouted angrily as Lucy and Victor tried patting her back to help her calm down. And it's pronounced Gojira, not Godzilla. Gojira? Godzilla. Does it matter? Asked Victor. I mean, they sound almost the same. Audrey turned with a look that could kill, and he quickly shut his mouth. Come on, babe. Can't you see how upset she is? Have a little empathy for once. Lucy berated her husband. Audrey sighed and thanked both of them for trying to help, but she needed time alone. Before they could stop her, she stood up and walked out into the rainy streets. Elsewhere, Nick explained all of his discoveries, theories, and confusions about the creature during a meeting with Colonel Hicks, Sergeant O'Neill, Dr. Chapman, Dr. Craven, Mayor Ebert, and several higher ups of the Army, Navy, and Air Force. His theory that it may not be the only of its kind, and that they might take over the planet if left unchecked raises concern with some, but others finds it ridiculous. Ebert and Hicks are most interested to learn why it has remained in Manhattan for so long, instead of moving on after feeding like it did before with the ships. To which Nick can only theorize reason. One of the one of which being the possibility of a nest hidden somewhere in or under the city. Ebert does seem concerned with the possibility after Nick explains how an ordinary lizard can lay up to 20 eggs at a time, and how the young could grow rapidly and further multiplying if the nest isn't found and destroyed soon. Hicks isn't so sure, though citing how Nick himself stated that it's only a theory and the nest could just as easily not exist. I'm aware of that, sir, and I'm also aware my test did come back negative. But you must remember, this is a brand new species we are talking about, completely unlike anything else on Earth. It's already breathed radioactive plasma, and who knows what else it could be capable of. I think we should take every precaution necessary to ensure that the safety of this city and its people, and more than that, taking this creature down could mean. I don't mean to interrupt Dr. Tatapoulos, one of the higher ups, an army general named Hunter Anderson suddenly spoke, but there's a news broadcast I think we all need to see. He then switched on the TV behind him. Charles Kamen appeared on the screen, alongside footage of the top secret tape showing the old man's interrogation. That's right, folks. This Godzilla is the monster responsible for turning our beloved Big Apple into a battlefield. And it doesn't end there. Scientist Dr. Nictotopoulos, who is currently working with the military to find a way to stop the creature's rampage, has warned that Godzilla might not be the only of its kind. If his theory is true, then it is possible more creatures like him could attack anywhere in the world and at any time. A truly terrifying prospect that would surely mean the downfall of humanity and the beginning of an age of monsters. Dr. Taptapalas also theorized that Godzilla may have even laid a clutch of eggs somewhere within the city or in the tunnels it dug out underneath the island. If he's been right then at any moment, hundreds of ravenous mini Godzillas could flood into the streets and begin eating everything in sight, including the residents who have yet to be fully evacuated. The room was silent for a moment. Then Ebert slowly turned to Nick with a glare of pure rage. You went to the press with this? He growled. Everyone looked at Nick, who was at a loss for word. What? No, no! I, I, I have no idea how they got that information. What about the tape? Hick asked. I remember it was left in your tent. If that's so, how did they get their hands on it? It is in my tent. It's been there since last night. Nick stopped dead as a realization once again smacked him upside the head. Oh my god, she took it. She? Who's she? Nick. Audrey, Audrey Timmons, a friend of mine. I saw her last night. Well, I was testing that blood sample. Let me get this straight. You let a civilian into a military combat zone, contaminated by radiation, no less, and someone working for the press at that, added Ebert. Well, I knew she was a reporter, but I never thought she'd do something like that. She was my friend. I trusted her. Well, that trust had just let classified information be broadcast to the whole country, interjected Navy Admiral Phelps. We might have a national panic on our hands thanks to this mishap, and you are entirely to blame, Dr. Tetapolis. I'm afraid you have become a liability, Doctor. Added General Anderson. We will have to ask you to step down from your current position. Wait, you're firing me? Asked Nick in disbelief. But my work isn't finished. Nobody's is. That thing's still out there. We don't know why it won't leave the city. Come on, Colonel. Back me up here. Sorry, Doctor, but I can't object to orders. You will be collecting all of your equipment and leaving the site effective immediately. Nick looks down, realizing all his effort have been for nothing. One stupid mistake cost him his chance to save his city, all because he thought he could still trust some stupid ex-girlfriend. Alright, it's settled then, he finally says. But I just want to let you know, or to know, that there is a reason why this monster won't leave Manhattan. Unless you want him to destroy it entirely, I suggest you try your damn hardest to find out what the reason is. We'll keep that in mind, Doctor. You may leave now, said the indifferent army general. He stood up and walked to the door, all eyes on him. He never thought it would have ended up like this. And he definitely didn't think Audrey Timmons would be the one to ruin everything for him. Looks back one last time at all the faces, some angry and some sympathetic. He sighs and leaves. Well, now that the trust has taken itself out, Mayor Ebert resumed. How about we all get back to figuring out how to stop that oversized iguana from stomping my city flatter than a damn pancake? Hey, show a little respect, snapped Elsie. What Nick did may have been foolish, but he still helped us out with so many things other in this operation. That is true, Dr. Chapman, but the mayor is right. We have to start thinking about trying to kill that thing, Hick said. I say we'll try the bait plan again. This time we set the trap in the central park. It's wide open so the target won't be able to stage another ambush. That's great. But your guns and missile didn't do jack shit to it last time, Ebert remarked. That's why we'll have 10 times as much firepower for this operation. I want every single unit out there when we have a clear shot. Hit that bastard with everything. we've got, and don't let up until we all know he's deceased. Sounds expensive, Colonel. And you are aware of the danger, right? Those are our, those are your men and ours, and they will be risking their lives out there. Questioned Admiral Phelps. That's why we'll be working with every branch of the military for this operation. The Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. I want as many units and as much firepower out there as the whole country can provide us. Stunned silence fills the room, but eventually, the generals agreed to the plan one by one. Hicks thanks them and begins mapping out the operation. Once he was finished, he added, "Oh, and before this meeting is dismissed, I just want to ask one thing. General Anderson, I am aware your forces have begun development of an experimental new types of missiles, right?" "Why, yes, Colonel, but still in prototype phase." "Can that prototype be launched?" "Well, yes, I suppose." "Then I want it on a plane and ready to launch at that thing once we have a clear shot." "Colonel, I'm afraid I must refuse. Even a scientist don't yet fully understand the potential of this missile, and it still hasn't gone through testing." "Hold on. What kind of missiles are we talking about here?" suddenly asked Mendo. "Well, our scientists have created a new, unique kind of missile that contains liquid cadmium. It was designed to be used on the creature after we learned of its radioactive properties. It was theorized by our scientists that the cadmium would be able to slow the creature's bodily functions and possibly even stop its heart with a high enough doses. But how are we going to administer it?" asked Mendel. "We've already seen that the regular missiles have trouble penetrating his skin, and what they do, the creature can heal his bleeding wounds almost instantly. It would be next to impossible to get that dose into his system." "What if we fired it into his mouth?" Hicks asked. "Surely that would be enough to get it flowing through. What do you think of that, Dr. Chat?" But when Hicks turned to where Elsie had been sitting, an empty chair greeted him. Daisuke Honda sits back in his chair while listening to the meeting. Of course, he already knew what was going on. His man had managed to hack into a top-secret US government network, and the information within gave him all the information he needed to complete his own plan. But he just needed one more thing to be certain and all would go well. "Sir, what should we do now?" asked one of his colleagues. "We are going to relocate our equipment here, and then we shall commence our own operation while the military keeps Gojira distracted. It may be our only chance." "Understood. Shall we leave right away?" "No. First, I must find that doctor they fired. He is the only one we can trust with this information." Nix walks through the rain, his bag heavy with all the equipment he had to take out of his tent. He hears the sound of water splashing behind him, the footsteps of someone running after him. He turns to see Elsie Chapman. "I'm sorry, Nick, for everything," she said, rain pouring down on both of them. "No, you shouldn't apologize. What happened to me back there wasn't your fault in any way. Anderson was right. The blame's totally on me." "Still, it wasn't right what they did. You know more about Godzilla than any of us, and firing you was a big mistake for them. I'm positive of it." "Well, thanks, I guess, and goodbye." He turned to leave, but paused, then turned back. "One more thing, Elsie." "What?" "For the sake of the city, for the sake of the whole world, do whatever you can to make Hicks understand that finding out why Godzilla's still in the city is paramount to stopping him." "Okay, I'll do my best, Nick." "Thank you. That means a lot to me." He manages a small smile at Elsie before turning and leaving for good this time. He keeps walking until a taxi pulls up beside him. He couldn't see the driver, but could hear him speak. Somewhat hard to understand because of his accent. You need a ride? Yes, actually. Newark Airport, please. He begins to put his thing in the back of the taxi when he once again hears footsteps. This time, it's Audrey Timmons. Nick, I just wanted to say, oh, you said enough already. Enough to get me tossed out like a yesterday's garbage. Nick immediately said, then turned away. Leave me alone, Audrey. Audrey pauses while she thinks of how to reply. Obviously, I'm sorry would be too cliche. Instead, she says, it's just that, well, I feel truly horrible for what I did. It was the worst mistake I ever made in my whole life, and I don't even know what I was thinking when I did it. Maybe that's because you weren't thinking when you did it, remarked Nick without turning around. Well, if it makes you feel a bit better, you weren't the only one who got screwed over by it. This time, Nick turns. What are you talking about? That slimy bastard Charles Kyman stole my report completely. It was my one chance to get proof that I had what it took to be a good news reporter, and he took it away from me. If I could get my hands on that no good son of a... Wait, I thought you were already a reporter. Audrey realized she accidentally just told Nick the truth. She then confessed that she isn't in fact a reporter and never was. She just wanted to impress Nick. Nick doesn't seem too surprised. Without another word, he finished packing his things and he hops in the taxi. Audrey stands in the rain while watching it go. Her guilt is so immense she doesn't notice Victor coming up behind her until he asks what she's doing, causing her to jump. I was trying to apologize to Nick before he left, but it didn't go too well. She sighs, watching the taxi grow smaller and smaller in the distance. I've completely ruined everything for him, all because I was too busy thinking about myself. Well, maybe you could make it up to him somehow. How could I ever do that? And don't you even dare suggest. Whoa. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yeah, I mean, what if you could help him? Maybe he was actually right about that big lizard, and if he was, the world needs to know about it. You could help him get to the bottom of this and report it at the same time. Win-win for both of you. Audrey looked severely unimpressed. Yeah, I'd just as soon I'd just as soon let that lizard eat me. Without another word, she turns and starts walking away. Victor starts after her, but then turns back towards the now very distant taxi. He gets an idea. He rushes to his own car and begins to follow the taxi. Nick sits in silence, contemplating everything that went wrong in the past hours, when suddenly he noticed the car isn't heading for Newark Airport. He asks the driver about it, but gets no reply. The car heads for a dock. Nick tries to reach for the door, but it's blocked. He now demands the car to be stopped and he be let out. The car does stop, but the door doesn't unlock. He demands to be released, and this time the driver turns to him, revealing the face of a Japanese man. I am sorry about this, Dr. Nick Tatopoulos, but I require help. What? Who are you? My name is Daisuke Honda. I work with a Japanese public security intelligence agency. Here's my card. He hands Nick a small card, and sure enough, the info checks out. Okay, but what are you doing here? And why do you need me? You will find the answers to both those questions soon enough. But first, you were not followed here, right? No. At least I'm 99% sure I wasn't. Good. Good enough, I suppose. Daisuke steps out of the car and then opens the door for Nick to Please follow me. Confused but intrigued all at once, Nick follows the mysterious man as they head for a small building at the end of the dock, unaware that Victor is watching from nearby. Nick and Daisuke enters the building, and Nick is shocked to see a group of well-dressed men, all presumably agents, setting up various equipment. You see, Dr. Tatapoulos, Daisuke begins, our job is to protect our country from any and all threats to national security, as well as to keep our involvement in things that may give Japan a bad look, quiet and unnoticed. He speaks. Nick noticed not all the men are Japanese. In fact, there's a few Americans with FBI labels. Nick points this out to Daisuke, who replies, ah yes, you are very observant, Doctor. Yes, we are collaborating with members of your country's Federal Bureau of Investigation for this operation. Operation? Nick asked. What kind of operation? Revealing why the monster we call Gojira and you call Godzilla is here in the New York City. Nick is taken aback by the statement. Wait, you mean you believe all that stuff on the news? Yes. And what's more is, well, then this was a waste of time for both of us. Nick said, suddenly irritated. Maybe I should have told you that nonsense was just that nonsense, and it got me fired from the military's campaign. Yes, I am aware of that. That's precisely the reason why I'm seeking your help. Nick is now confused. You still take this thing seriously, but there's no evidence that anything I said is true. It's all just theories and hypotheses. Daisuke paused, then smiled. There is now. Outside a half-broken window, Victor watches in confusion as Nick is seemingly interrogated by a Japanese man in a fancy attire. Wasn't that the Wasn't that guy the taxi driver? Where are all those other people? What's Nick doing with them? Question flashed through his mind, but no answers came. He needed a closer viewpoint so he could hear what they were saying, so he carefully makes his way across the dock, being as quiet as possible, before sneaking to another partially broken window closer to Nick. He couldn't risk peeking his head through without being spotted, but now he was close enough to hear the conversation. Wait, let me get this straight, he heard Nick say. The Japanese have known about Godzilla for all these years? That is correct. We were the first to discover him, after all, the Japanese man said. But that doesn't explain why the FBI is helping you guys, Nick said. Oh damn, Victor thought. The feds got Nick? That is because they too want to cover up your country's involvement with Gojira. Back in the Daisuke. Sir, I have an update. And her voice suddenly chimed in. Victor risked a quick glimpse and sees an American standing in front of Nick and the Daisuke character. He informs them that the military will be conducting another operation to lure out and destroy Godzilla tonight, and they will be using their experimental new cadmium missiles on him. Daisuke thanks him, then continues. You see now, Dr. Tatapoulos, that time is not on our side. This is why I'm asking for your assistance in our own operation. We might only have one chance to succeed. I'm still not fully sure of what's going on here, though, Nick said. Daisuke then takes a few steps out of the view, before returning with a small TV and projector on a stand, and a tape. Doctor, I recommend you watch this tape. It contains all the answers to the question you have about Gojira, and will reveal the goal of our operation here as well. Nick picks up the tape and turns it over in his hand a few times. He finds writing on it, the first line being top secret, to no surprise. But the next line is more interesting, almost like the tape's title, The Legends of Gojira. Nick then walks up to and inserts the tape into the projector as the lights in the rooms are dim. It starts with a classic old-timey countdown before the films begin, first showing footage of a tropical island as a voice begins to speak. Otto Island, an unexplored landmass in the South Pacific. My crew and I traveled to this mysterious island to document an environmental survey as part of my doctoral studies. My name is Kayohamai Yamani, paleontology major at Tokyo University. The natives of neighboring islands speaks of legends of a mythical sea creature who would rise from the depths to seek their fishing boats and terrorize their village. The film shows several pieces of art depicting various mythological sea monsters. The natives call this kaiju Godzilla. Kaiju? Nick asked aloud. Then sorry, I'm not very fluent in Japanese. It is a term that is in our language means strange beast. Daisuke clarified for him. The film continues, showing more of the island. When we discovered on Otto Island, we were confronted with harsh terrain, impenetrable jungle, and undiscovered beauty. As we traveled along the shore, we made it an extraordinary discovery, a series of enormous depressions in the sand. At first we thought it could have been the result of seismic or volcanic activity, but Geiger's reading indicated the presence of intense radiation inside the depression. This made us suspect that the recent hydrogen bomb test in the Pacific had something to do with this phenomenon. Even more shockingly, a trilobite, a prehistoric species of aquatic arthropod long thought extinct, was discovered in one of the depressions. As we continued our investigation across the island, we all picked up on its eerie atmosphere. The crew became paranoid as they began to fear we were being watched, and that the island itself was alive. They reported seeing movement among the mountain, a sound like rumbling or even growling in the earth below, and something massive moving through the water offshore. At first, I dismissed the claim, thinking the heat and possible radiation exposure was messing with their heads, but I soon began to feel that something was terribly wrong with the island. I began to realize we had traversed into a land frozen in time, and the legend of Gojira was much more than just a mere myth. It didn't take much longer for us to confirm the existence of the enormous creature. While out on a morning hike, I spotted the outline of something moving past the mountains and brought my crew to the top of the hill for a closer look. Then I saw it. A creature from the Jurassic era. It lifted its gigantic over the mountain to roar at us, sending my crew running away in terror. I only managed to briefly get the giant beast on film before turning to flee as well, witnessing a terrifying green fire erupting from its mouth. By the time I caught up with and helped calm the crew, we turned back to see it was gone. Further investigation revealed more depression, and now confirmed to be footprints leading away from the mountains and back into the sea. We discovered a large tunnel dug out by the creature across the island. Nick leans in closer, now very intent to see all the information this old footage had to offer. We had stumbled upon a power greater than our scientific understanding. Dr. Yamani's voice continued. As I processed the data over and over in my head, I hypothesized that Gojira must have been a prehistoric type of dinosaur, both semi-aquatic and subterranean in nature. One of the first species to evolve to live on the surface, underground, and in water. It was able to stay in a state of suspended animation inside of hollow caverns deep at the bottom of the ocean. There it hibernated for millions of years before it was awoken by the dawn of the atomic age. The creature must have been inadvertently exposed to the hydrogen bomb testing and mutated by the massive exposure to radiation. I'll be damned, Nick thought. My theories and Elsie's were correct. He's both a dinosaur and a mutant at the same time. For a while, I struggled to understand how Godzilla functioned as an animal, Dr. Yamani said. His body is too massive for him to sustain himself on a diet of fish, people, livestock, or even whales. But then, I obtained top secret footage from an anonymous source that reveals Gojira is the cause behind a string of recent nuclear disaster. Security cameras footage shows the kaiju wreaking havoc on the reactor, an incident that they were apparently covered up. After seeing the footage, I now believe Gojira is able to consume radiation as a energy source, and so it seeks out whenever possible to sustain his massive metabolism. That answered one of Nick's own question, but still didn't explain why the monster was scattering and stockpiling meat in New York. As my crew and I struggled to survive long enough to warn the world of this impending threat, we made another horrifying discovery. A second and third Gojira. Nick's eyes widen as he sees footage of two more creatures, almost exactly resembling Godzilla, but similar at a much smaller size. However, these are apparently juvenile specimens, much smaller and more immature than the first. We observed them following the adult on multiple occasions, who displayed what appeared to be a parental bond with them. Not long after, we discovered a cave hidden deep in the island's jungle that eventually opened up into a wide cavern. At its end was a huge fossilized skeleton, resembling the same species of as Gojira, but not as large, possibly a female specimen, and Gojira's long-lost mate. It was curled around a perfectly preserved nest with dozens of eggs, but only two broken. I realized that these eggs, much like the surviving adult specimen, was preserved in times thanks to the sheltered conditions of the cavern, waiting millions of years to be born into the atomic age. These creatures poses a punishing threat to the entirety of civilization on Earth, but Gojira and his kin cannot and must not be destroyed. He survived the fallout of hydrogen bomb, something no other organism on Earth is known to be capable of. He could be the key to our biggest scientific questions and mankind's most pressing issues, including the possibility of nuclear war and how to minimize damage caused by one. As insane as it may sound, I fully believe Gojira and his family should be contained to this monster island so they may be studied and live in peace. As Gojira slept, the world around him has changed. Humankind played with the god's fire, and in doing so, we were awakened. We have awakened the king of all monsters. Failure to react responsibly to this discovery will surely result in our destruction. The film finally ends. Nick sits back and lets out a deep sigh he didn't realize he was holding in. Well, now he finally knew what Godzilla was. An aquatic saurian that survived the mass extinction 65 million years ago by hibernating undersea, then reawakened and mutated by thermonuclear bomb test into the monster ravaging New York City today. Not only that, but Godzilla has two children, but there was still a lot of left unanswered. What happened to those offspring? Are they still on the island or did they die at some point? If the incident in the 50s were covered up, how many government knew of the existence of these creatures? Of course, one question was more important than all the others, and he decided to ask Daisuke first. Well, thank you, Mr. Honda. That type was indeed very informative. but there's still one thing I don't get it. If this Auto Island was Godzilla's original territory, then why did he travel all the way to New York City? Daisuke paused for a moment, like he was trying to find the right words, then spoke. Dr. Tetapolis, my team and I have reasons to believe that Gojiro's offspring, the same one you saw in Dr. Yamani's recording, are here in the city. Nick's eyes widened again, almost unable to believe the words he just heard. I'm sorry, what? You think those two baby Godzillas are here in the Big Apple? What? Like they're hiding somewhere? No, not quite. We believe that they were forcefully captured and brought to a hidden research facility. What makes you think of that? Nix asked. Well, for the past 44 years, Auto Island and Gojira were kept a secret from the modern world. The government of both Japan, who discovered the creatures, and the United States, who were responsible for their creation, worked together to cover up any evidence of Gojira's existence. They were assisted by Dr. Yamane, and as he hoped, Odo Island became a sanctuary for animals where they could live out their days in peace, as well as be studied by many of those of the world's top scientists. For decades, everything ran smoothly. The creatures were found to have a small periods of activity where they sought out sustenance, like radiation. Of course, we couldn't risk Gojira attacking any more power plants, so both radioactive waste from power plants are rolled wide and the herds of livestock like cattle and goats would be placed on the island to keep the creatures sated when awake. Once they would once they had satisfied the hunger, they would return to hibernation. It was a seemingly perfect balance. But about a week ago, something changed. Field rangers reported no signs of Gojira or his youngs, and upon further investigation, it seemed that they had left the island. We grew more concerned when we found traces of what looked like some kind of capture operation. There were burned nets, smashed weapons, and a trail that looked like a large metal object, perhaps a cage, being dragged and loaded onto a boat. We immediately realized there must have been some form of foul play, and when we could not contact our American allies, we began to suspect they had a role in it. So, do you think the American captured the babies and brought them here? Precisely, Daisuke answered. And now, we have recently confirmed our theory. Thanks to the help of some FBI agents, we have managed to find top secret US government files to revealing they did indeed go rogue. They have captured the infants and relocated them to a hidden research facility somewhere within New York City, presumably underground. The goal of this mission is to study the infant and hopefully learn of any weaknesses their species might have. Daisuke paused before continuing. Then they will kill them and then destroy their father. Nick was taken aback by this development, but he also realized that his theory was right after all. Godzilla hadn't left the city for a reason, and that reason had finally been revealed. It also explained why he was gathering food. It was to feed his lost young, when he found them. Sir, if I've got it right, that means Godzilla came here to get his kids back. Yes, this is the most logical explanation, Daisuke answered. I believe he followed the scent and cause of his distressed offspring across the ocean to here, and now has been trying to find them. Wait, if that's the case, why hasn't he found and destroyed that apparent facility yet? Nick asked. I cannot say for certain, but it's possible that the infant have been sedated and knocked unconscious, and are, and so are unable to call for help. That's why he cannot find the facility, but he refuses to leave the city because he knows his songs are here. Nick turned the ideas over in his head. It was plausible, but still sounded very unlikely. Still, though, with the evidence presented by Daisuke, he had reason to believe him, and if he was right, then it could mean that it could be Nick's last chance to save not just New York, the whole but the whole country, maybe even the whole world, from Godzilla's wrath. He finally relented. All right, I'm in, he told Daisuke, then added, but I want to know what exactly your plan is before we leave. Excellent, exclaimed Daisuke before answering Nick. As for our plan, we will attempt to find a hidden facility. It's likely been evacuated since Gojira came ashore, so hopefully entry will not be a problem. Then what? Once we have located the baby Gojiras, we have two options. We could kill them, as I'm sure the facility has the function to do in case they ever escape. Then hope the military is able to kill the other Gojira. Yeah, they haven't had much success with that so far, Nick said. Is there a plan B? Yes, there is, but you might find it risky or even a little crazy. Well, what is it? We could free the babies and hope that once their father reunites with them, he will leave the city and return to Otto Island, his home, in peace. Nick is shocked by the suggestion and question immediately began flying through his mind. What if those things multiply? What if those populations outgrow that little island? All animals need to expand their territory as their number grows, and if they were to spread around the world, it'd be the end of the human race. Daisuke, sir, an FBI agent suddenly brought Nick back to reality. The military has begun preparing the operations. We're running out of time to start our own. Then tell your men to double their efforts. We need to be ready to leave in at least 10 minutes. Yes, sir. The agent turned to leave, but Nick stopped him. Hold on. Sorry, sir, but I just wanted to ask one question regarding this whole situation. If the US government approved the idea of capturing the baby Godzilla, why are you and your man going against the order? Well, Doctor, let's just say that sometimes we are at the FBI needed to take matters into our own hands for the good of this country. He then added, as you just learned, we made a real mess of things back in the 1950s with our bomb test and these mutations and mutation. So I guess you could just call us the cleanup crew. He then left. All right. Well, what are we waiting for? Nick made for the door. Then Daisuke spoke up. Doctor, before we leave, there is someone I would like you to meet. He then turned his head back to the back of the building and shouted, Mickey! Someone appears and starts to approach them, obscured, obscured at first by the lighting, but eventually steps into view. It was an older Japanese woman. She approaches Nick and introduces her. Hello, Dr. Tapolis. I'm Mickey Saigusas. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. She holds out a hand to shake. Nick takes her hand somewhat awkwardly while saying, Oh, well, that pleasure's all mine, I guess. Say, what exactly is our role here? I was the apprentice of Kyohei Yamane, Mickey said. Ever since he discovered Gojira in the 1954, he was the lead researcher on Otto Island. He wanted to learn everything about Gojira, reveal all the secrets to his biological function and undiscovered powers. Unfortunately, he passed away 3 years ago, but since then, I have been continuing his work despite growing older myself. Really? Well, I'm sorry for your loss, Nick said, then redirected the conversation. Miss Sagusas, if you don't mind me asking, what are your thoughts on this current situation with Godzilla in New York City? Well, if I'm to be honest, I feel sorry for him, Mickey said. Wait, really? Nick was a little surprised at the answer. Yes, after all, Ojira is potentially one of the a dying species. He survived the extinction event that destroyed his original home, was forced into hibernation in the cold, dark depths for millions of years, was muted into something terrible and monstrous by the evils of mankind. And now he lost the only thing he has left, his family. Mickey looked down and sighed. I could never begin to imagine how it feels to lead such a lonely existence. Her speech gave Nick's pause. He realized that he had never bothered to think about what it was really like from Godzilla's perspective. Before this, he thought of Godzilla as a big animal, only relying on its instinct to survive. But then again, many animals are known to display intelligence and emotion. What was it like then for Godzilla, desperately searching for his family in a unfamiliar and hostile environment? But still, even if he wasn't inherently evil, the threat he posed to modern civilization couldn't be ignored. Dr. Yamane even knew that. Sir, all our forces are ready to move. The FBI agent suddenly reappeared. Ours as well. A Japanese agent woke up beside him. We are waiting your orders, Daisuke. Then we shall move out immediately. Put everything into position and begin our operation as soon as the military lures out Gojira. Wait a minute, Daisuke. We still haven't decided what we're gonna do when we find those babies. Well, it seems we will have to cross that bridge when we get to it. As you Americans like to say, Daisuke replied. Now come, we must get ready as well. He leads Nick and Mickey to a room full of different gears and weapons. Nick was shocked to see so many assault rifles, explosives, and even rocket launchers. He asked Daisuke how he acquired so many weapons, to which he responds, Our friends from the FBI let us borrow them for the time being. He then chuckled. But with all due respects, sir, why do we need to be armed like this if Godzilla's not even gonna be there? Well, it never hurts to be extra prepared, just in case something goes wrong. And I can say from personal experience, Mickey spoke up, when a plan involves kaiju, a lot can go wrong. That got another chuckle out of Daisuke and a slight smile out of Nick. They suit up, preparing all the gears and weapons before turning to leave. Nick noticed that Mickey isn't following them anymore. Miss Aiguses, is something wrong? Aren't you coming? Oh no, sorry, she said, shaking her head. What? Why not? I thought you were expert on these things. I told her to stay behind, Nick. Daisuke said to him. She may be an accomplished scientist, but she has no combat experience, so this mission is too dangerous for her. Oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, Nick replied. Well, let's get going then. Nick, Mickey suddenly said. He looked back. I just wish, I just want to wish you good luck with with your mission, she said, then paused. And also, if you can, please try to avoid harming Gojira's young. They've done nothing wrong. And I wish for them is to return to the island with their father. Well, I guess I can try, but you gotta remember that if we don't find a way to stop the adult Godzilla, he'll destroy their whole city. Dr. Tetapolis is right, Mickey, Daisuke added. There are still millions of innocent people in danger as we speak. I know that, but Mickey looked forlorn. Gojira and his children are still living beings, and I believe every being deserves a chance to live, no matter how big or scary they may be. Mickey then smiled at him. Take care, Nick, and please, be careful. He nodded, then glanced at Daisuke, who nodded at him. It was time. This was the moment he knew that would decide the fate of New York City and its citizens. As Nick walks out of the door, he thinks of everything leading up to this moment. He realized that even if he didn't survive this, as long as it was a success, his name would go down in history. He could be satisfied with that. He decides.